It would be good if few of you can switch on your videos for a better interaction. I'll be able to get a good feedback whether you are understanding things or not. Yes, Divya, Kushi, the names I can see right here. Would you please switch on your videos? Okay, I think 2 or 3 minutes more. We are going to wait and then I'm going to start with the class. Am I audible to everybody? Just confirm that at least. Am I audible? Okay. Okay, I think we'll start with the class. The other students will join uh, meanwhile. So, the contents of the syllabus, I think you all are aware of it by now because these are your revision classes. So, there are 4 units that we need to cover in total, right? And you all have already covered the units. It would be a brief brush up of all those units and certain important concepts which you are most likely going to be tested for in your exam. Okay, so there are 4 units in total, and in your first unit, there are two important uh, domains. So, first is relevance of statistics, and second is central tendency. So, in today's class, that is from 12 to 1, I'll be covering these two topics. And as I go ahead with these topics, if there are certain areas or certain concepts that you want me to elaborate more on, I'm completely open to that. You just have to let me know of the same. Okay, because I don't know with what depth you all have covered this in your previous classes. So it would be great if you could give me that feedback and let me know if you would want me to elaborate on any of the topics which I am going to cover. Right. However, I'm going to emphasize more on the topics which are important and the topics which you will be, seeing in your examination paper. So because revision classes are meant for that. So according to my plan and the schedule that I have decided upon, I'll be devoting 1 hour for each topic. So, like, there are 5 topics in total. So, 5 hours have been allotted to us. So, 1 hour per topic, we'll be taking up the topics as per this pattern. Okay. And if there is any particular unit that you want me to elaborate more on, or there are more doubts in that particular unit, so you'll have to let me know and then alter things accordingly. So, your first topic, the theme that is important is relevance of statistics. So when you had started with this course, and this is basically an introductory lesson for the same, that what is the actual relevance of statistics. In this particular unit, you have to be aware of few important areas. Few important topics are there. First is what psychological research is. So you can be asked a short question regarding this, that what is a psychological research and what are the important features of a good psychological research. Then there are also things regarding how do you classify a good researcher. So what are the characteristics of a good researcher? So these are few important areas that you begin this lesson with. So coming to what a psychological research is, I think by now you have a brief idea about the same, that what psychological research is, what it is meant for, why is it conducted in the first place, what are the, uh, the final benefits of it, advantages of it, and how does psychological research help us. So psychological research is basically a systematic kind of inquiry that you carry out in order to understand the different human behavioral traits. So why do you do that in the first place? Why is psychological research conducted? Why do we need to carry out this inquiry? Because psychological research helps us find certain patterns, certain factors, certain identifying markers, which will help us understand things in detail, in great depth. So once we have the idea of things in detail, once we are able to elaborate on it, and once we have the detailed understanding of it, we can create a lot of things for the welfare of people, especially in the psychological domain. So once I know that these are the behavioral patterns, this is how the society is working, this is how the social factors are playing a role in the development of humans, this is how psychological traits are manifesting. तो जब मुझे इन चीजों के बारे में आइडिया होने लग जाएगा, I will be in a better place to formulate so many things, whether those things are related to policy, whether those things are related to creating a kind of a treatment, a diagnostic plan, anything in the realm of psychology. So psychological research is going to enable me to understand things in detail, especially with regard to human behavior. Okay, is this part clear to everybody? Do you have any doubts in this? Any questions related to psychological research? It would be good if you could interact so that I have an idea. Okay, great. So the next topic is that when it comes to psychological research, there are many components to it. There are many features to it. But one of the most important things that is unmissable, or something which is going to, be the core ingredient of the psychological research is, can anybody guess that? Something which is very important to psychological research, or for that matter, any kind of research. When you venture into the field of research, when you start practicing as a researcher, there is one thing that you need to be very well aware of, very well versed with, because if you have a good grip on that, your research would come out to be, it would be a very, very beneficial kind of research. It would be a very genuine, credible kind of research. But if you miss on this particular component of the research, then you can create blunders also when it comes to the world of research. Any guesses with regard to that? What is that important component of research? Okay, that component is methodology. So whenever it comes to research work, whenever it comes to practicing as a researcher, one very important thing that you need to take care of is the methodology that you are going to use in your research. What is methodology? Methodology covers everything, the blueprint of the research, the kind of, the foundation of your research, the foundational layout of your research. So whatever your sample is going to be, the techniques that you are going to use in your research work, okay, the kind of statistical techniques you will be using for analysis, the layout, the brief blueprint of how you are going to work on your research, the procedure of it, the methods involved in it, all of that is about a methodology. So a good sound methodology is something which is going to distinguish between a good research versus a bad research. So methodology is a very important component. Coming to the next part, Okay, just before I move on to the next part, there are two words. One is methodology, another is method. These two words are not the same. These two have very different meanings. Methodology is an umbrella term, it's a very broad term, which includes everything. It would include the techniques, it would include the blueprint of your research, it would include the statistical techniques you are going to use, the factors you've decided to work on, the variables, all the things pertaining to your research would be a part of your methodology, how your research is actually going to unfold. But when it comes to method is restricted to the kinds of techniques you are going to use. Only the technical part, the techniques, the and analytical techniques, the statistical techniques, the theoretical techniques that you are going to use to assess your data. Right? That is about methodology versus method. Okay. Coming on to the next part, which is what makes a researcher a good researcher? What are the features of a good researcher? What are the characteristics of a good researcher? So when we say that a researcher is a good researcher or a researcher is a sound researcher, there are certain features associated with that researcher. First feature is that the researcher is able to make the best use of limited resources available. So no research work that you are ever going to take up in life, or however a research is being conducted in whichever area, the resources are never unlimited. Whether it comes to time, whether it comes to, other materialistic resources, infrastructural resources, administrable resources, resources are always limited. So the kind of capacity related to resources for the researcher is limited and there are boundaries to it. So the best kind of research work is that which actually makes the best use of these resources. So जितने भी आपके पास limited resources है, if you're making the best use out of it in that stipulated limited amount of time and material available, then you are considered as a good researcher. Apart from that, your ability to grow as a person, to be flexible to new changes, to new insights. Because whenever you take up a research project, what happens is that at every uh, point in time, whenever you're discovering new things, you are meeting so many new individuals as your participants, you're going through so many different research works of previous researchers. At every point in time, you're going to encounter a new piece of information. So how flexible are you to adapt to those newer perspectives, to newer ideologies? What is your tolerance power? How not rigid you are and how flexible you are, so that you are able to accommodate the different views, the different perspectives that you are encountering. That is also guide your character as a researcher. Then another feature is how organized you are as a person. So when it comes to research work, it has to do a lot with organization. It has to do a lot with how you plan to, how you plan the layout of your research work. So it is not something that can go in a wavered way, or it is not something that you can, change at every moment, digress from the plan at every moment. You have to be very specific, very planned, very meticulous regarding what you are planning to do next, because that is something which is going to streamline your research work. Because knowledge base again is infinite, you need to anchor yourself somewhere. You need to decide on that this is my area, this is the limited scope in which I am going to work, right? So all of these things actually play a lot of important role, or these are important factors which are going to make you a good researcher, or which are going to enable you to carry out your research work well. Is this part clear to everybody? You could get a question regarding this, that what is psychological research and what are the features of a good researcher. If you have any doubts so far, please let me know. Then we'll move on to the next topic. Okay, great. So now coming on to the next topic, when we talk about psychological research, there are various parameters that we need to cover as a researcher, as a psychologist, when it comes to carrying out any sort of research that we are wanting to do. So suppose I am doing a research on a very newly discovered topic in psychology, say gaslighting. Gaslighting is a very, trending and emerging phrase these days in the psychological realm, and people are actively researching on it. So when it comes to these concepts, these newer concepts, as a researcher, your first job is that, suppose a new phenomena, new concept you need to work on, and you accumulate information regarding this. First step would be to explore that concept. So whenever you are carrying out a research, first stage is of exploration. You explore it, you explore the topic, you explore the concept. And what is covered under exploration? It is regarding the what's of the topic. Now when I say what's of the topic, means uske andar kya kya hai, what is that topic about, what does that topic entail to cover, what does that topic, hold on to, what is the essence of that topic. All of these things are a part of exploration. So the first job is that you explore that topic. Second is, when you have a basic understanding of that topic, कि हमें पता चल गया ये topic क्या है, what is it about, what does it entail, where do I situate this topic, and all of those things you are familiar with as a person, as a researcher. Next you go on to describing that topic. In description, basically you would cover that how do we go about better understanding that topic. So how is the keyword in description? सबसे पहले आप explore करोगे कि what is the topic about. Secondly, you are going to describe it in detail. How are the factors influencing that topic? How is that topic relevant? How is that concept, important to the functioning of individuals? So second आपकी job होगी to describe that. So you start with exploration, then you describe it, that is known as description. तो जब भी आप कोई psychological research करोगे, your major aim, goal, or whatever your envisioning is, it is related to what's of that topic, that is exploration. Second is you're going to describe that topic. And third is you are going to explain that topic. Now, when it comes to explanation, the keyword is why. Why do you think that topic has come into picture in the first place? What are the causes of it? Uske root causes kya hai? When suppose we were discussing about gaslighting, so gaslighting as a phrase or gaslighting as a new concept which is being, researched upon actively these days. Why has it come into picture in the first place? What are the causes of it? When you spot a person gaslighting themselves, do you have a brief idea about what gaslighting is? First of all, anybody who knows what gaslighting is, you can just type in the chat box. Or you could just quickly, research about it and come back and let me know what gaslighting is. I would like to know it from you people. What is gaslighting? Anybody? Just Google it and come back with the answer and write it in the chat if you're not comfortable to speak. Okay, I'm waiting for the answer, then I'll move on to the next topic. Quickly. Kushi, Vandana, Yati, Divya. Okay. Yes, please go ahead.
Gaslighting is to manipulate someone using psychological methods into
Could you be a
questioning.
bit louder?
Yeah, wait a second. Let me add my mic. Wait a second.
Yes, please. Yes.
Wait a second. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, it's better now. Yes. Go ahead.
Manipulating someone using psychological methods into questioning their own sanity or powers of reasoning.
Yes. Absolutely correct. Very well
Okay.
defined. I think that is the brief understanding, the basic understanding of gaslighting. When you manipulate the other person and to question themselves regarding their sanity, regarding it. I think somebody's written in the chat box as well. Okay. No. Okay. So yes, that is the correct understanding of gaslighting. So when it comes to a concept like gaslighting, which is gaining momentum these days, we as researchers are actually trying to explore this topic more. It is very relevant to know about the causes of it. Why does that happen in the first place? Why do people start actually manipulating the other person to question their own sanity, question their own logical ways of reasoning? So why does that happen? That becomes a core component of explanation. तो आप जब भी कोई research work कर रहे हो, so you are going to explore that, you are going to describe that, you are going to explain that. Because once you know the factors of it, the causes of it, the thing following it, which becomes very easy for you, or I would say which becomes a cake walk rather, कि आपको पता चल गया कि ये causes हैं, ये factors हैं जिसकी वजह से ये चीज हो रही है. Now you are in a good position to do what? As a researcher or as a psychologist, you are in a good position to do what? Yes. Once you know that these are the causes, these are the reasons behind a certain phenomena, you are in a very well equipped position to do what? Explain. Yes, explain is a part of gaining that idea of the causes, कि इसकी वजह से ये हो रहा है. अब आपको पता चल गए हैं causes क्या है. So as a researcher now, you are, yes, definitely you are in a better position to explain that phenomena. Also, you are in a better position to predict and control it. कि ऐसा जब भी होगा, if these are the causes, if these are the factors which are leading to this kind of phenomena, तो अगली बार भी जब ये factors repeat होंगे, the next time these factors, these these influences or these kind of causes are going to be repeated in this scenario, this is something which is going to emerge as its result. तो आप predict कर पाओगे. So the next time you observe the similar pattern or the similar causes, you'll be very confident to say that this is happening because this is actually the case. And I have researched upon it and I know the causes, I know the root features because of which it is leading to it. So explanation makes you uh, basically predict the patterns in future. And once you know that these are the things which are going to repeat because these are the factors which are leading to these things, you will be in a good position to control that. Now, as a psychologist, as a researcher, the last aim, the last job, I would say, the final outcome of any of your research or any of your, inquiry would be to create a plan of treatment, one, or to create certain guidelines for some policy making. तो अगर आप गैस लाइटिंग पे रिसर्च कर रहे हो, yes please, please
The
go
last
ahead, you've raised
last
your
aim
hand.
is
Yes.
the last aim is about description.
What, could you please
The
repeat?
last aim is, as a researcher, it's about the descriptive nature,
No,
like
no,
this.
no, 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 that is in the initial stage. That is
Okay.
when you are understanding that phenomena, तब आप उसको describe करोगे, you're going to describe that in detail. The
Mm-hmm.
final outcome of that description, of that explanation, of that exploration, all of those things put
Mm-hmm.
in together, the last thing would be that you start designing a plan of how to control that, apply that. Did
All
you
right.
get it?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so the last step of it would be to control these factors in a way that it leads to maximum benefits on the part of people. So if I have researched on gaslighting, how am I going to use that knowledge to actually work for the welfare of people? So if I know that gaslighting is such a common phenomena, that it is happening in, you know, it is happening in multiple spheres, in multiple ways, people are gaslighting each other, and that is leading to mental health deterioration. If I am aware of it, that awareness comes from exploration, description, and explanation. The next step as a researcher would be that I would start making a plan. I would start creating a designated layout कि इसको control कैसे करें आप. How do I venture into actually altering it? कि अब ये जो हो रहा है इसको मैं better way में कैसे place out करूं ताकि it gives some sort of advantage or benefit to the people. Because the ultimate aim of any research work is that you are contributing to the society in some way or the other. That is how we decide that a research piece of research is successful or not. Because if you are able to do something for the benefit of people, that means your research work is worthy, it's credible. But if all of that knowledge goes in vain, then that is not something which is eventually going to be of great use, right? So the last step would be to control it. Whatever you have accumulated or whatever you have consolidated as a part of your information as a researcher, the last step would be based on executing it, making a plan out of it. So till now, is everybody clear? Any doubts still here? You can let me know. Then we'll move on to the next topic. Okay. So I assume that there are no doubts and we'll move on to the next topic. The next topic, which again is very important, is the types of research. So there are different types of research that uh, we are bound to conduct, or there are many types of research which we are required to conduct in different situations, in different contexts. So ऐसा नहीं होता कि कोई type of research किसी type of research से better है या worse है. These are just different forms of it, and the situation in which one form might fit in the best way, it might not be the same for some other situation or context. So it is highly dependent on the context, the situation, the need, the aim, the purpose of your research. तो जो भी आपका पर्पस है, फाइनली वट एवर यू आर इन्विजनिंग कि ये इस रिसर्च वर्क में दिस इज समथिंग आई एम planning to do, this is something I am planning to generate as a piece of information, depending on that you are going to decide कि कौन सा form of research या कौन सा type of research आप you will employ in your research project. Okay, so the first important differentiation when it comes to research work is basic versus applied research. So there's one form of research which is known as basic research, and there is one form of research which is known as applied research. Basic research is which is only done for creating a certain theoretical framework, any kind of newer piece of information, which eventually is going to help the society or people in the long run. But at that particular point of time, जब आप वो research work या वो theory generate कर रहे हो, it is not having any immediate benefit. जैसे for example हम गैस लाइटिंग के बारे में भी बात कर रहे थे, तो I start designing a project on gaslighting and I start working on that research project. Gaslighting के ऊपर I start creating my research work. Now, this is a basic research because in this particular research, I am going to generate a lot of theories related to gaslighting. I'm going to understand a lot of factors which affect gaslighting. I'm going to understand a lot of, situational aspects when it comes to gaslighting. तो बहुत सारी चीजों के बारे में मैं रिसर्च करूंगी, बट जब मेरा रिसर्च वर्क खत्म होगा या मीनवाइल व्हेन आई एम कंडक्टिंग द रिसर्च, उस टाइम पे it will not have an immediate benefit to the individuals. In the long run, it is going to be used in policy making, it is going to be used in some form of treatment design, some form of diagnostic criteria, and then finally my research is going to be of use. Not saying that basic research is useless, just that it does not have an immediate kind of benefit to the individuals for whom you are actually envisioning its benefits for. So that is basic research. कि आपने आज कोई research work शुरू करा, it is highly theoretical, theoretically grounded, और आपने उसके बारे में theory generate करी, information generate करी. So it is basically advancing knowledge in a discipline. तो किसी भी discipline में कोई भी नया concept लेके you've started researching about it and you've started generating information, that is basic research. When it comes to applied research is a more practical form of research. When I say practical, what do I mean by it? For example, you are working in an organization as a manager, or you are probably in an HR department, and you want to carry out a research in order to understand why your employees are reporting late to the office. Why are they not being punctual enough? तो आप उसके बारे में एक research करना शुरू करते हो. You start doing that research, you start finding the causes of it, you start finding the constraints that they're encountering because of which they are being late to the office on a daily basis. और आप कुछ ऐसा plan बनाते हो after that research that your employees actually reduce that lack of punctuality, or that behavioral reduction is there once you create that plan after conducting that research. So could you see the difference? In this particular type of research, हमने research करी and now we are using it in an immediate plan to change the particular context or scenario. उसी scenario को change करने के लिए, better off करने के लिए, I start using that theoretical knowledge जो मैंने gain करी थी and I start designing an intervention. So whenever I start designing an intervention or a plan so that I get practical results out of it, practical changes out of it, that becomes applied research. So basic research is only advancing your theoretical knowledge for the time being. Applied research is more practical. It is more context specific. It is more of immediate value. तो आप उसी को लेके you are going to create a certain treatment plan or certain kind of layout which is going to help you change that situation in that moment. That is applied research. Okay, did you understand basic versus applied? Should I move on to the next type of research? Any doubts? Okay. Next type of research is lab versus field research. Lab versus field research में क्या difference है? Lab research is that research which is carried out in a laboratory setting in a very controlled manner. When I say controlled manner, control का मतलब है कि बाकी सारे factors जिनसे मुझे कोई मतलब नहीं है as a part of my research, I am going to eliminate those factors or control those factors, and I am only going to specifically focus on those factors which are important to me as a researcher. For example, I want to see that caffeine intake, what sort of effect does caffeine intake have on attention level or arousal levels of individuals? मुझे ये देखना है. So I think most of you would be aware of the fact that caffeine is a stimulant. So once you have some sort of caffeine in your diet or you have an intake of caffeine, it leads to a certain kind of, a certain sort of arousal, a certain sort of elevation in your system. So suppose as a researcher, I want to test that whether it is happening or not. So one way to do that is that I call individuals, participants to the lab, and I offer them a caffeine rich drink. And then after they've had that drink, I test them for their arousal levels. I test them for their attention levels. Right? Now, in this particular experiment, which I am conducting, or research work that I am conducting, the other factors which could also act as stimulant or which could also affect the results of my study, I'm going to limit those factors. For example, मैं सारा जितने भी, if the person is encountering any sort of noise, any sort of extraneous variables जिसकी वजह से उसके attention में fluctuation आ सकता है, arousal में आ सकता है, any sort of music for that matter, or any calls that the person is getting on the phone, और any other factors जिसकी वजह से उसके attention और arousal में कोई भी difference create हो सकता है. In the lab, I'm going to limit all those factors कि ये सारे factors lab में नहीं आने चाहिए. Only the factor that I am interested in, which is caffeine intake, that should be the sole variable, the sole factor that I am concentrating on. So lab experiments basically give you that advantage. They give you that opportunity that if you want to study the effect of something or on the other, then you have a controlled atmosphere, a controlled setup. कि जो चीजें आपके use की नहीं है, you can disregard those, you can eliminate those or minimize those, and you can concentrate solely on things which are going to affect the results of your research. That happens in lab experiments. But then there are situations, there are scenarios जब हम lab experiments नहीं कर सकते, जब हम research lab में नहीं कर सकते. For example, I want to study कि earthquake का क्या impact हुआ है on the victims, the psychological consequences of earthquake on the victims of earthquake. Now, I cannot create earthquake-like situation in the lab. That is impractical, right? That is something not feasible for me. So, मैं क्या करूँगी? I'll go into the field. I'll go into the natural setting or the natural surroundings to observe what is actually happening. So, there are multiple instances जब आप वो lab में create नहीं कर सकते. In that case, you need to go out into the field, observe the natural settings, observe the natural phenomena, and then decide that what are the factors which are important and how do I incorporate those factors and their effects in my research study. So that was about lab experiments versus field experiments. Did you all understand the difference between the two? Any doubts in this? You can ask. Okay. Next is quantitative research studies versus qualitative research studies. Quantitative research studies में क्या होता है कि all your findings, all the data set that you are getting from your participant, all your findings, all the kind of information that you are getting from your participants is in the form of numbers. It is in the form of symbols, numbers, some sort of statistical analysis, some sort of statistical, management of the data is there in quantitative study. So suppose मुझे ये देखना है कि what is the average number of individuals with 90 as their IQ level. So I am going to बेस माई रिसर्च ऑन नंबर्स. तो मेरी जितनी भी रिसर्च वर्क होगा वो नंबर्स के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट होगा, आईक्यू नंबर्स के ऊपर. द फाइंडिंग्स दैट आई गेट, द डेटा दैट आई गेट, all of that would be in the form of numbers, symbols. So I'm going to use a lot of mathematical techniques to calculate my results, to come to conclusions. All of these are forms of quantitative research, जिसमें हम numbers के form में analysis कर रहे हैं, statistics का use कर रहे हैं, and all of the data that you are getting has some sort of code in the form of number. So it is not in the form of words, it is not in the form of experiences of individuals, it is clearly in the form of numbers. And using those numbers, you are going to analyze what are the conclusions of your data set, what are the conclusions of your research work. Versus when it comes to qualitative research, कई बार ऐसा होता है that you do not have numbers to understand your research problem. For example, I want to ask the COVID survivors that when they lost somebody who was very close to them, or they lost a loved one during the COVID pandemic, what sort of grief did they encounter? What was the level of distress they were going through? Right? If I ask them such a question, कि क्या experience था आपका उस grief का, या the distress that you had to undergo, numbers solely cannot do justice to this research problem. कि हाँ हम 10 फील कर रहे थे, हम 8 फील कर रहे थे, 7 फील कर रहे थे. We cannot use numbers as a deciding factor for our study, because it has much more to do with the feelings of the person, the experiences, the in-depth, emotions that the person is facing. ऐसे रिसर्च स्टडीज में वी आर गोइंग टू यूज क्वालिटेटिव रिसर्च. क्वालिटेटिव में we will be more focused on what? The feelings, the emotions, the in-depth experiences, the words of the person. So once our motive, our agenda, our purpose is to understand in-depth experiences in detail, ways of functioning, numbers alone cannot do justice. Then we move on to the qualitative form of research. So these again are two different forms. Sometimes we require to use quantitative ones. In quantitative has its own advantages definitely, and it is also widely used. Qualitative also has its own importance, and you can't disregard that, and that is also used in situations where quantitative is not enough and it cannot do justice to the research problem. If you have any doubts still here, do ask. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next type of research. Okay. Next difference between two types of research is cross-sectional versus longitudinal research. Okay. So cross-sectional research में क्या है? In cross-sectional research, same moment of time पे, same instance पे, you are going to interact with participants of different age groups from different groups, basically, or different cohorts, जैसे हम बोलते हैं. We call these different groups as cohorts. Now, what do we mean by this? For example, I want to compare कि 6th grade के जो students हैं versus 7th grade के जो students हैं, उनके IQ levels में क्या difference आता है. ठीक है, what is the sort of difference, or what is the gradient shift when it comes to a person coming from going from 6th grade to 7th grade? What is the shift in the IQ level? Now, as a researcher, suppose that is my aim to explore. The one way to go about it is that I take few people from the 6th grade and I take few people from the 7th grade, and I start comparing their IQ levels, and then I come to a certain sort of conclusion, a certain sort of inference that these are the differences in the IQ levels. So this is how I can interpret it. That is one way to go about it. This kind of research is cross-sectional, in which I have taken two different sections of individuals, two different groups of individuals at the same time, and I'm comparing the IQ levels. Second way out could be a longitudinal study. Longitudinal study में क्या होता है? We'll have to wait for the 6th graders to actually enter the 7th grade, and then we are going to conduct research studies in two phases. The first phase would be when the people are in 6th grade. So your students are in 6th grade, you give them an IQ test, you carry out that IQ test, you come up with the marks, you come up with the scores, you wait for these 6th graders to go to the 7th grade. And then you reassess them for their IQ. Now, also, you have two sets of data, you have two sets of scores. But in this case, you had to actually wait for your participants to mature enough and go to the second section, go to the second group. This is a part of longitudinal study. Longitudinal study also happens when you have to assess individuals or when you have to evaluate individuals throughout their lifetime. Suppose हमें ये देखना है people who are more optimistic, people who are more positive in their temperament, do they live longer or not? So suppose as a young researcher, I start researching this research problem on individuals who are 18 years old. I assess their temperament. कुछ positives वाले मैंने ले लिए, कुछ negatives वाले ले लिए. And then I start evaluating them and I keep evaluating them till the time they are alive, because I have to see whether their lifespan is longer or not. So this is longitudinal study that I am going to follow my participants throughout their maturation. I'm going to assess and compare the results. And cross-sectional may, at that point of time, you are going to take individuals from two different sections and then compare. Now, both of these research works have their own benefits. First, let's talk about cross-sectional. Cross-sectional का सबसे बड़ा benefit क्या है? Guess करो. What is the most important benefit of cross-sectional? You could write it in the chat box. Why do you think cross-sectional research is, more preferred, or it's more comfortable form of research than longitudinal? Anyone?
Because we get data at same time,
Yes.
the both
Yes.
groups.
Very good.
Yeah, and we can compare it.
Yes. Very
But
good.
in longitudinal, we can't compare them
Yes.
because it's take longer time than the cross-sectional one.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. So when it comes to cross-sectional research, it is a major time savior. उसी टाइम पे आपको दोनों का डेटा मिल रहा है as a researcher, because again there is paucity of resources इतने नहीं है, time इतना नहीं है, so you would want to be quick that way कि आपको उसी time पे you're getting the data and you're able to analyze it and you're able to come to the conclusion. So it's a quicker method to take up. When it comes to cross-sectional research, it saves a lot of time. When it comes to longitudinal research, it also has certain benefits. एक बेनिफिट लॉन्गिट्यूडनल रिसर्च का ये है कि यू आर टेस्टिंग द सेम पार्टिसिपेंट्स. तो personal differences are not going to create any sort of differences in your research results, because these are the same participants. जैसे आप पहले 6th graders और 7th graders को cross sectional में compare कर रहे थे. So if by default 6th graders have a different sort of temperament, they are very naughty kind of kids, and 7th graders जो है वो वैसे बड़े sincere और serious kinds of students हैं. So by default, these two groups, the people that you are testing on, they are completely different. So these factors can influence your research results. But when it comes to longitudinal, it is the same set of individuals. तो personal factors जो हैं वो cut off हो जाते हैं and they do not create much of trouble for the researcher, because it's the same people whom you're testing on. So personal differences are not going to create major problems for you when it comes to deciphering the conclusions or inferences. Right? So this was about types of research. This is a very important question. You can be asked about this in exam, that what are the differences between these kinds of research, basic versus applied, lab versus field. They can also ask you about cross-sectional versus longitudinal. So you should have a fair idea of it. And when you're framing your answer, just write the few important keywords that we've discussed here also in the class. And when you'll be reading, you will have the brief definition of all of these types of research plus an example. Would be a very good, it would be a cherry on the top. So always back up your answers with examples whenever it comes to psychology, so that your examiner also gets a good hang of what you're trying to write, plus you have a better clarity as well. So always have examples in mind. You will be able to frame your answers better. Okay, that was about types of research. Now coming on to descriptive versus inferential statistics, because this entire paper is based on statistics, psychological testing, and statistics is again a very, very important branch of mathematics. And there are two important categories of statistics, two important types of statistics, you could say, or forms of statistics. First is descriptive statistics, another is inferential statistics. So, what is descriptive versus what is inferential statistics? Basic statistics, if we were to define statistics, what is statistics? Statistics is basically a branch of mathematics, number one. It comes from the basic philosophy of mathematical calculations, understanding of data. It is based on that. Plus, statistics is basically about IAS. Now, whenever you get a question on what is statistics, how do you define statistics, remember this mnemonic IAS. Now, what is this IAS? This IAS is elaborated as statistics is basically a subject matter, it's a branch of mathematics that helps you interpret. I from interpret, okay? A from when I say IAS, I stands for interpreting the data. A stands for analyzing that data. S stands for summarizing that data. So whenever you have huge data sets in front of you, जैसे आपने suppose 10 lakh individuals के ऊपर census करा, ठीक है, regarding to gauge the number of people in their families, to understand the familial dynamics, आपने 10 lakh people, you've conducted a study on 10 lakh individuals. Now you have a lot of data available with you in the form of numbers. It is not possible for us to go through each and every digit, each and every code, and then come to analysis of the data. It would be much better if we could get two or three numbers as representation of the entire data and then come to our conclusions, because as a human it is not feasible for us to run ourselves through such lengthy sorts of data, which we inevitably are going to encounter in psychology also. क्योंकि आप जब research करते हो, that research is not on 10 individuals or 15 individuals, that research is on 50,000, 1 lakh individuals, तब जाके आपकी generalizability increases. ठीक है, so for that we need certain tools, techniques and statistical measures to handle that sort of data. So statistics basically helps you in interpreting that data. It helps you in analyzing that data. It helps you in summarizing that data. And when it comes to inferential versus descriptive statistics, what is the main difference? These are two different forms of statistics only. दो चीजें हैं, सेम ही उनका एम है, to make you able to handle that data better and to able to understand the traits or the psychological attributes of that population better. Ultimate aim is the same. The difference is in the technique. Descriptive statistics में क्या होता है कि the major aim or the purpose or the technique used in descriptive statistics is that you are aiming to describe that data only. For example, if I say I have a data of 10 lakh individuals regarding their preference of a particular fruit, whether they like a particular fruit or not. I have an opinion of 10 lakh people on that, right? So as a person who is using descriptive statistics का main aim ये होगा to give you a number, a summarized value or a summarized indication result of the entire 10 lakh ka data, so that you are able to make meaning of that data. So for example, I say that the most repeated answer in the data set is yes. For example, mango is my favorite fruit or not. That was the question that I had in my research study. And majority of the answers or responses that I got were yes, were yeses. So when I used a certain descriptive statistics technique, which is known as mode, we'll come to that, I come across the fact that majority of people have used this word yes in the data. So this is going to help me come to a conclusion, to an inference, that majority of people actually like mangoes. So mango is a very widely or very commonly sought after fruit, right? So descriptive statistics is you get a number for the entire description of that data. That could be in the form of mean of the data. We'll be discussing about mean, median, and mode. And all of these three parameters, when we talk about mean, we talk about median, we talk about mode, these are values, these are basic techniques or important figures that tell you about the entire data set, which is very extensive. which you cannot go number by number. तो उसलिए हम कोई mean, median and mode calculate कर सकते, so that we get the basic hang of it, the basic essence of the data. That happens in descriptive statistics. In inferential statistics, what happens is that sometimes it is not possible to get data from all the individuals possible. For example, I want to conduct a study on IQ levels of 7th graders in India. Now, as an ambitious researcher, suppose I start carrying out my study and I start, giving questionnaires to individuals and I start getting it filled. Do you think by any means it is possible that I cover all 7 graders from India? क्या मैं सारे 7th graders को by any means cover कर सकती हूँ in every nook and corner of India, all the 7th graders, whether it's from public schools, private schools, all sorts of private institutions. Can I ever cover all the 7th graders? That is humanly not possible, right? So for such cases, when the entire population cannot be covered, we take a sample out of the entire population. तो अगर मैंने 7th graders पे study कर रही हूँ, so maybe the 7th graders to whom I have access, right? To 7th graders who are basically admitted in schools nearby me, the area in which I am researching, or to whom I actually have an access through the authorities. I am going to incorporate those 7th graders in my research study, and I'm not going to include all the research, all the 7th graders possible in India. This is how I am going to select a group of individuals or sample from the entire population. And then I'm going to understand their, psychological traits. For this instance, it was IQ. So I'm going to understand their IQ levels. Now I have an idea of IQ levels of a lot of 7th graders. So as my conclusion or inference, I can say that these results may also be valid on all the other 7th graders of India as well. This is how you take up a sample from the population, you work on that sample, you analyze it, then you generalize those results to the entire population. ठीक है, तो inferential is all about taking up some part of the population, working on it, understanding it, using statistical measures on it, and then inferring your results for the entire population. So for example, you cook a dish at home, right? तो अब आपको ये देखना है कि उस पूरी डिश में is the amount of salt right, the amount of spices right or not. You are not going to taste the entire dish, you're just going to take a spoon full of that dish, you're going to taste it, and then you're going to generalize it, क्योंकि spoon में जो the contents of this dish reflect कि salt is less, so the entire dish is low on salt. You're going to add salt to the entire dish. So this is inferential. You take a part of it, you analyze that part, you get your insights of it, and then you generalize it to the entire population. So that is the difference between descriptive and inferential statistics. This is also an important question from the point of view of examination. Any doubts still here? Inferential versus descriptive statistics? Okay. All right. Now just let me know one thing. If you people had attended your regular classes for this subject, did you cover grouped frequency distributions, cumulative frequencies? Or were you taught only till different types of scales? Because as a part of your curriculum, this part has been eliminated. The ones in which cumulative frequency and group frequency has been discussed. So I'll be taking that up only if you've been taught in the regular classes. Otherwise, I'll be moving on to the next topic of central uh, tendency measures. Did any one of you attend your regular classes? If you have any idea regarding whether cumulative frequency was taught.
About the cumulative frequency and all that.
Yes. Were you
Yeah,
taught that? Group frequencies, histogram, all of that?
I I just read in the SLM only.
You just read it in
Yeah,
SLM. Yes, it's there in SLM, but that is for your personal understanding.
okay.
That is not a part of your, exam oriented syllabus. That is why I'm asking, because we have limited time with us for revision.
Okay. I
Okay.
have a question. Shall I ask?
Yes, go ahead.
Is it useful or not? The statistics, the calculation.
It definitely is useful, but given the paucity of time, we have many other useful concepts also which need to be
All
covered.
right.
So that is something that I wanted to cross check with you people whether it has been covered or not. I think somebody has asked whether you could explain percentile rank and percentiles. I can explain. Have you been taught this in your regular classes,
No, we had not.
Divya? Were you taught this as a part of your regular syllabus in the classes? Okay. So what we can do is, since you people are quite interested and curious to know all of this, but you that is not a part of your regular syllabus, what we can do is we'll be meeting again at 2 today, right? 2 to 4. You
Okay.
can just go through this material in SLM and just let me know if there are areas or concepts which you are unable to understand. I can specifically focus on those. So I can devote 10-15 minutes to those and we
Hmm.
can briefly cover all of that. And if there's something which interests you, which you find it is useful, uh, I can cover that, but we'll do that briefly so that other topics are not left, which are also important from the point of view of your exam. So you have an hour with you after this class ends. It's about to end, and we'll be
Okay.
meeting again at 2. So at 2,
Okay.
you can just let me know that from this area, from cumulative frequency, histogram, etc. So will this not come in theory exam? No. This is not a part of your syllabus. In
The
SLM, it has
calculation
been
will not
mentioned
come.
that it is excluded from your current syllabus. Yes.
The calculation will not be come in the exam.
Not the
We don't have
calculation
to
for mean
practice.
median mode that we are going to do. It is
Okay.
only regarding cumulative frequency, the graphs, the histogram part.
Oh,
That is something which I was asking you, that whether you
okay.
were
In
taught
depth
that in the
needed.
regular classes or not with Karuna ma'am, the classes which you had with Karuna ma'am.
All right.
Just go through it once and we'll be meeting again at 2. Just let me know. So we can decide there and then. If you feel like, covering certain important aspects, you are curious to know about it, I can cover that. But I'm not going to go into great detail. One, because it's a revision class, and two, because I don't want to miss out on other topics, which are also very important.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So just briefly go through it and just let me know at 2.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Okay. I think we'll meet at 2 now. Okay. We'll resume at 2 with the revision.